What's up everybody, my name is Yandere, and it's time to continue down the path of pacifism in Resident Evil 4 Remake. No longer will we be solving our problems with violence, but rather love. These Ganados are just confused and need a good influence to put them back on track, and I'm up for the challenge. Let's be to those in need, as they say, or some shit like that, I don't know. In case you need a refresher on the rules of the challenge, I'll flash them on screen for a second. If you want to read them fully, I recommend pausing the video. Also, if you haven't seen the first part of this challenge, then I'll have it pop up at the top right of the screen now. A lot of crazy stuff happened in that video, and I explained the challenge in greater detail, so you definitely don't want to miss it. Honestly didn't think this challenge would get much harder after part 1, but boy was I wrong. There were so many roadblocks on this path that I can't even begin to tell you. There were soft locks, actual impossible sections, hours of backtracking, stupid AI, and a ridiculous amount of other sections that required countless retries. Before we get into the grid of it all though, I just want to ask very quickly that you like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me a lot and I'll love you forever. Okay, let's go. So after the torture of chapter 7 in the last video, I was more than happy to not have to deal with Ashley for this chapter, but it didn't really matter because there was still plenty of bullshit left for me to deal with. I thought about killing the fish near the fountain pond, but I couldn't because I don't believe in that. Those poor soulish fish deserved a peace, damn it. I'll leave them alone and go to the merchant where I can finally purchase the body armor. The body armor makes you take about 30% less damage, give or take. This is awesome because that's basically the last major thing I can buy with the pesetas, so most of my dough will be going to repairing the knife and the body armor. Moving forward, I immediately get put in an unfortunate section because there's already an unavoidable kill in this section. To advance into the chapter, you have to kill the red zealot to get the key item required to open the door. This also sucks because the red zealot has maybe the highest health value of any regular enemy in the game, so it wasn't going to be exactly easy to take him out with the default handgun. I got hit hella times, but I eventually was able to take the red zealot out on the first try by using one of the explosive barrels that he just so happened to stand right next to, so thank you very much about that. After I grabbed the item I needed, I looted a bit, then got the hell out of there. After a bit, I ran into an old friend, Ada. What follows is the best case of pacifism I've seen in a cutscene yet, where Leon uses a knife and some superb CQC to disarm Ada in mere seconds. Ada tells me to leave Ashley and get the hell out of here, which honestly after the last chapter I was half tempted to take her up on that offer, but I would be suffering anyway, so I decided I might as well continue onward. Pretty cool of Ada to look out for me though. There's another puzzle that we gotta solve to get out of this room, and the castle designers decided it would be a brilliant idea to put every single item you need for the puzzle in the exact same room in plain sight. Great job. I solved that puzzle, and soon after we're introduced to what is probably the worst Plaga type to deal with for this challenge. These new Plaga attach to enemies like a parasite and control their bodies. When they do this, they run at you like Usain Bolt and hit you with whatever weapon they're holding. This is extremely annoying because it can be pretty hard or even impossible in some cases to outrun them. So think of them as normal enemies on steroids in this state. This first one is particularly annoying because he's blocking the tiny path we need to get past, but I perfect parry it twice and book it past him. After chilling out with the merchant for a little bit, I head into the most annoying part of this chapter by far. Before that though, I'd like to show you a few tricks you can do to skip pretty much half of the entire section. There are a couple well-placed shots you can perform to open the gates from the opposite side, and a few can be skipped using grenades instead of bullets. It's one of my favorite tricks to do in the game because it's really easy and satisfying. What do you all think about it? Well, we don't have much time to enjoy the novelty of it because I got a massive armored Gigante trying to smoke my ass like a brisket. During this section, the Gigante picks up and throws massive rocks at you. And can you take a wild guess what these rocks do when they hit the zealots that are right on my ass? Ding ding ding, you guessed right. Or at least I hope you did. They died. And the best part is the sheer range these rocks have is absolutely massive. So I have to somehow make it miss all the enemies. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I was actually pretty stumped on how to keep the enemies from dying here. Getting the enemies right behind me to die was just RNG and resulted in a fail pretty much 50% of the time.
You guys are really starting to become a giant pain in my ass.
I could not have said it better myself, Leon. So I started by running forward immediately after the Gigante started throwing the rocks and praying the people behind me didn't die. If they didn't, then I would run as fast as I could to an area where the rocks would miss me and hit the wall behind me, which would hopefully keep everyone behind me safe. After that, I try to haul ass to the next checkpoint, but the problem is I have to turn a lever, climb a ladder, and then run. This gave the Gigante another 1 or 2 rock throws, and the zealots in all of their infinite wisdom absolutely refused to get the out of the way, so they would always die. I tried a good amount of times, and not once could I get up the ladder before someone died. After several failures, I did my tried and true strategy. I ran forward and prayed to God no one would die. It took a few attempts, but I did get to the checkpoint. After I got the checkpoint, I went out of my way to make sure no one died. I dropped to the bottom of the ladder and looked everywhere I could to make sure there were no dead bodies. Now I just want you all to remember this because there are absolutely zero signs that anyone had been killed. Assuming everything was good, I got to the top of the end and shot the cannon at the overgrown abomination to take him out for good. To blow open the door that we need to get past, we unfortunately had to kill the Gigante, which is the second unavoidable kill for this chapter. After he was dead, I blew open the door and the Gigante was still trying to murder me. I did some sick parkour skills and avoided it though. I eventually find Ashley and assure her that we'll get rid of these cooties we got. That scene was the end of the chapter. Well, that's great because I really didn't want to do that chapter anymore. What? What is this? How? Who the hell died? I was so bewildered that someone died that once I loaded into the next chapter, I backtracked the entire section to see if I could find a body or the item drop from the person who died. I did not see a single thing. This is what really aggravated me above all else because I didn't even have a lead on where I should try to be more careful on the next try. Well, whatever. I went back and did the chapter again in the exact same way, and this time the kill counter was how it should have been. I guess Mother Nature blessed me here and gave me a break for once. But not really because I had to do the chapter again anyway, but whatever. Going into the next chapter we have Ashley again. Yay. I realized that I forgot to remove the sunglasses from Ashley from the previous video, so I rectified that and put her wig back on. Beautiful. After that we head into a maze, and I swear, every time I think a section is going to be easy, it ends up being a
giant pain in my ass.
So in the maze, you have to lower 3 levers so the gate that leads to the next section opens up. And they're actually pretty easy. Ashley got her neck bitten off, which I didn't even know it could happen, but after that is when it all just goes downhill. After lowering the 3rd one, a bunch of zealots start bum rushing Ashley, and if I don't get to her, it will be an immediate game over, which I think is the only time in the entire game where it's like that, so thank you so much, Capcom. I ran over to her, so she started following me, and this resulted in an absolute RNG fest that I had almost no control over. So, if the dogs decided to hit me, that would be a failure since I couldn't get to her in time. If I do make it to her, it's about a 50-50 chance that she'll die to a dog anyway, and if that doesn't happen, there's a fair chance that she'll get grabbed by a zealot, which is an instant fail. If we somehow managed to get out of there, then we had to get through the gate without her getting grabbed. Since this was the case and the quick path was completely overrun, we had to take the scenic route and go around the entire maze to get to the stairs that lead past the gate, which made the chances of her dying or getting captured even higher. This was just extremely toxic, and I think this was the first part of the run where it felt like every failure was actually completely out of my control. The waterhole was pretty bad obviously, but this just felt even more toxic than that for some reason. Unlike the waterhole, however, it didn't take over 100 attempts. I got a lucky run and we made it past the gate. This section of the game is actually pretty cool because you need to get 3 key items to get through the locked path that advances the story. To get each of the items, there's a different gimmick for all of them that needs to be fulfilled. I got the easy one first since that doesn't involve killing any enemies. All you have to do is solve a quick puzzle in the dining room. I then went on to the next easy one, but it's only easy if you do a certain trick. You see, normally on your way to get the key item, you'll be dropped to the bottom of this room where a ton of enemies will ambush you. Now, I'm not going to say it's impossible to do it that way as a pacifist, but I was not dealing with that. If you throw a flashbang at the lever before going to the point the cutscene starts, you could actually skip all of that entirely and get the item no problem. Really cool. Now the next key item is by far the hardest one. There are 7 night enemies in this section that you have to kill after grabbing the key item. Killing these dudes with the starting handgun is pretty tough because for one, they all have a plaga, and 2, they only have a small section that you can shoot to get it to pop out. I tried it again to see if I could get an out of bounds glitch to work here, but it was completely impossible. So I just bit my tongue and dropped down into the pit. I had over 180 handgun rounds, so I was pretty confident I could kill them and have a ton left over. Well, safe to say I completely underestimated how absolutely garbage the handgun is by itself. I feel like the only reason I actually ended up getting it done is because of the blue flames that Ashley throws down. When the knights are in the blue flame, they cannot move, so this gave me plenty of time to shoot their weak spot. Even with this though, I was barely doing any damage. By the end of the fight where I had the last 3 enemies clog out, I had a whopping 2 bullets left and absolutely 0 health, so I had to throw a flash grenade to kill them. I guess this is technically a failure of the challenge, but if 180 bullets from the handgun couldn't kill them, then I was not about to count that to be honest, since I had pretty much every single drop of ammo you could get up to that point in the game. But if you want to count it as a failure, then that's fine. After they were all dead, I get the hell out of there and put on the key items to the statue so we could progress. I get locked in a cage and tell Ashley to run, and this is the section where I get to actually play as Ashley. Ashley is a nice lady and can't kill anyone no matter what, so I just run past every knight trying to kill me. At least I tried to do that, but then I got my back blown out a few times. But despite that, I ran and ran until I didn't get my back blown out, and gave Leon the key to get out of the cage. Ashley gets taken away again, and the chapter ends. I'm not gonna lie, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a teeny tiny bit glad she got taken away because of the nature of the challenge, but you didn't hear that from me. Chapter 10 is possibly the most interesting chapter in this whole run thus far for a couple of reasons. Starting the chapter, I immediately do a glitch to skip a small section of the Novistador room to hopefully save myself some healing items. I get through after taking a bit of damage and get to what I consider to be the biggest roadblock of this entire run so far, the double Garrador room. This room on casual playthroughs alone can be pretty tricky if you don't know the strategies, but trying to do it with the standard handgun without having the zealots around the room die in the process, I genuinely think it might be impossible. No matter how you try to lure the Garradors, the enemies are eventually going to die because the handgun simply does not have enough firepower to take the Garradors out fast enough before they destroy one of the zealots. And trust me, I tried. I even backtracked the entire castle to try and get more ammo after the night section. I went through the audience chamber, the water hall, the Gigante rock section, and the maze. The craziest thing happened during this though. I met the most friendly zealot I had ever seen in the maze. He just let me walk right by him and stared blankly at nothing. It kinda made me worried. Is he okay? Is he off the za? What horrors has he seen? I had many questions and wasn't getting any answers, so I tried to be his friend. Hey buddy, it's me, Leon. I know things may not be okay right now, but we can make it through this. What's your name? Okay then. Hey, I know. Why don't we take a picture together? Nothing like a wholesome photo to brighten the day and make fond memories, right? Okay man, I gotta keep looting this castle, but it was nice meeting you. What an odd fellow. Anyway, there's a very important clip I need to show. During the backtracking, I glitched through the clock tower that you're supposed to get to in chapter 12 by using the door skip trick on the gate that's locked. I looted the entire area like normal to try and get more ammo, and then went back to the castle shortly thereafter. But pay close attention to what's happening on the screen as it's an important clue. Once I got back to the Garrador room, I had a lot more ammo, but I eventually realized no matter what you do, the Garradors will eventually get aggro to one of the enemies. Even in cases where there's absolutely zero reason to attack the zealots, they'll just decide, nah, we're killing your ass, sorry about that. After coming to the conclusion that this is probably an actual impossible task to do with just the handgun, I decided to use the flash grenades to make it a bit easier and hopefully possible. My plan was to shoot the big bell in the corner near the stairs and lure them both to it. I would then throw the flash grenade and start going to town on their plaga to hopefully stun them again before they recover from the flash itself. I repeated this a few times and to my surprise, they actually went down pretty easy. I think what also helped in this is that the Garradors flare their arms around when they're stunned, which can harm enemies as well. So I assumed they were doing damage to each other on top of the flash grenades and handgun shots for their weak point. No one else died either, so it was a win-win. I looted the area as much as I could for resources and shortly after came face to face with the manlet Salazar. And he has his servants doing some really vulgar things with Ashley. This low-key made me regret sparing all those zealots at this point, but I couldn't let my anger get the best of me. What I can do, however, is get this big overgrown cockroach-looking ass abomination off my back, cause good lord, your breath smells like the underside of Rick Ross's neck rolls! I think he might have heard my thoughts or something though, because right after that he threw me right into the massive hole in the middle of the room, which kinda seems like an OSHA violation. You might want to look into that, Salazar. Anyway, I end up in the sewers of this godforsaken place and have to navigate my way out of here. Luckily, there's yet another out-of-bounds glitch we can use to make this section a lot easier and faster. If you go to the section where you climb into a small opening in the cave and flick your mouse to the right before interacting with it, you can actually climb right out of bounds. You can use this out of bounds to go right to the end of this small section. This completely skips all of the Novistadors in this section, which is a massive dub for this challenge. The next part is none other than the Verdugo fight. While Verdugo is very scary and has the most health of any boss in the game if I remember correctly, it's actually one of the easiest bosses in the game because you don't even have to kill him. You can choose to wait out the give or take 4.5 minute timer on the elevator arriving and just leave the boss fight entirely. This is the best case scenario for this challenge, so that's exactly what I did. But that didn't mean the Verdugo would make it entirely easy. Verdugo is pretty damn fast and can do some big boy damage if he catches you, so I needed a strategy to run away from him and inconvenience his AI as much as possible. I made a pretty great strategy from the very start, which honestly felt like a dream come true after most of my ideas failing miserably throughout the challenge. The strategy was to use the nitrogen in the first room so I could get out, and immediately loot as much as I could so I could get on the elevator as soon as it came. After I got all of the loot, I would do laps in and out of the room right where the elevator is. I would run in a way to bait out most of his attacks and simultaneously avoid them since I'd be around the next corner before it could hit me anyway. This didn't always work out and I got caught a few times, but I never died. I repeated this for the 4.5 minute timer and actually got out no problem, making this probably the easiest and most painless boss so far. Unless you want to count Mendez, who I skipped entirely, but we ain't going to talk about that. Once I got to the top of this elevator after having some crazy cootie symptoms, Luis gave me a medicine to help suppress the development of the cooties. So maybe dying in the waterhall in this entire castle for hours and hours on end was worth it? Whatever. On a better note, we got through this chapter no problem. Nice. Chapter 11 is the funniest chapter in this whole challenge for me. If you've played the game, you know exactly what part is coming. But we got some business to take care of before we get there. In this section, we team up with Luis and make our way through the mines. Unlike the cabin though, Luis killing the enemies wasn't as big of a deal. Luis actually really sucks at shooting the enemies in most cases. The only reason there was a problem in the cabin was because the timer was just long enough that eventually Luis would eventually get lucky and kill someone. But here it isn't a problem since I was just going to haul ass as fast as humanly possible and get the hell out of there. What was a problem though is the fact that there was another dynamite enemy. I swear, every time I see one of these dudes, I just sink into my chair. I contemplate my life decisions, my regrets. Anyway, there's also a chainsaw man and lady in this section that I need to avoid as well. And the best part is that they can randomly decide to kill the Ganados as well, so that's just lovely. As usual, I baited the dynamite guy to miss everyone and ran into the building to pull the lever that led to the dynamite we needed to blow open the path later on. The chainsaw lady was right there guarding it, but like a real thug, I just ran right past her. After that is when the fun really began. So I need to get out of the building and up a flight of stairs, then I need to wait a bit for the path that I lowered with the lever to get down so I can get past, which means I have to keep the dynamite guys from killing people while not getting my head chopped off by a chainsaw. I failed a good amount of times. The chainsaw lady humbled me a few times and the dynamite dude blew himself up or killed people, but I did eventually make it past the path after it lowered and grabbed the TNT. I got the hell out of there as fast as I could and grabbed the checkpoint, so I reloaded it and went back to see if anyone died. I didn't see any signs that anyone died, so I went on ahead. The next section is one of the coolest in the game to me because Luis and I double team a couple of Gigante enemies. At first I was going to say screw it and use the lava pit to kill them, but I realized that would be kinda going against the challenge, so I decided to man up and take the giants down with the handgun. And this might shock you all, so I need you all to sit down. So Luis in this section is actually helpful. I know that might sound crazy, but without Luis it might actually be impossible to beat both of them on my own. He takes the attention of one of the Gigante enemies, which gives me plenty of time to go all out on the one targeting me. And it goes down pretty easily actually. I think they have less health than the Gigante back in the village, but I'm not 100% sure about that. After the naked one was dead, the one left was the one with the armor. Luis runs away and leaves me to fend with this big bastard by myself, but he comes back with a massive stick of dynamite, jumps on its back, and plants the dynamite on its back. I light that shit up like it's 4th of July, which means its plaga is exposed and vulnerable now. Now this is where Luis stepped up like a goat after so many times of screwing me over and saved me a lot of pain. I think Luis's Red 9 does more damage than my handgun, and he was actually pretty damn accurate with shooting the plaga on the giant's back, so we were dealing mad damage in record time to this dude. After knocking him down about 3 or 4 times and blasting him non-stop alongside Luis, we were able to take up both the giants without using the lava pit. I even went to the challenge tab to prove it since I hadn't done it yet on PC. After finishing getting out of that room, Luis reveals that these mines are sacred because this is where they discovered the cooties. After hearing that, I was half tempted to blow this whole ass place up for making me endure all this torture on the Pacifist journey, but I refrained. Luis and I hop on some dingy ass doohickey of a minecart, and this is the section I was hinting to at the start of the chapter. So this is the minecart section. And on any normal playthrough, this is a walk in the park and is a nice breather since all you have to do is aim and shoot the Ganados that have crossbows. And the best part is that they all die in one shot. Well, the fact they die in one shot is the worst case scenario for this challenge. I can't shoot them at all or it'll be blood on my hands and I'll have to restart. So I thought this might be impossible for a short while since they would inevitably destroy our minecart and make us die in the most Looney Tunes ass death possible. But after some testing I realized something. The devs at Capcom were absolute chads and made it to where you can actually shoot the arrows out of the air with the Red 9. When I first realized this, I was straight up speechless. I guess I should have assumed and expected it considering you can parry it, and you could literally do this all the way back in Resident Evil 5. And hell, maybe even the original game. But still, I was just amazed at how much care went into this game. Then, I realized the gravity of what I would have to do. I would have to shoot all of the arrows out of the air before they hit the cart. Now, I'm pretty confident in my aiming, but there's some shots that I would have to do in a fraction of a second. I did have some leeway because it's not like I needed to shoot every single arrow, but I would need to shoot the majority of them. Needless to say, I failed here. A lot. In fact, it took multiple hours. So I think it's time for a small montage of all the Gary's Mod tier deaths and ragdolls I was subjected to in this time period. What a great time that was. As hard as it was at times to shoot the arrows, this was honestly one of my favorite parts of the run because this was entirely skill. The enemies would shoot at the exact same timings and placements every single attempt, so if I got hit, it was my fault completely. This was a nice breath of fresh air, and it felt like my aim was actually improving a bit from this because of how precise some of the shots had to be. There was only one section I thought was complete BS though, because I literally shot the arrow out of the air and it hit my card anyway. But other than that, it wasn't too bad despite how long it took. I also found the deaths absolutely hilarious just because of how ridiculous they were. After both of the minecart sections and getting almost annihilated because Luis broke the brakes off the minecart, we had to get through the hive sections where there's a ton of Novistadors. I'm not gonna lie, I completely abandoned Luis and ran as fast as I could out of there. I got hit multiple times on the way there because the camouflaged enemies would sneak attack me, but I eventually made it to the merchant and saved the game. I then reloaded the save to get the enemies off of Luis and I for a bit, and then booked it for the elevator where the enemies would leave Luis alone and he would come running like a good boy. He then tells me that he was working with these baddies to develop the cooties. I was hurt. I felt betrayed. How can Luis do this to me? Before I even had time to grieve, Luis gets stabbed in the back by a G.I. Joe looking ass dude who happens to be the dude who taught me back in the sandbox, Browser. In a fit of anger, and because I literally can't do anything else here to progress, I pull out my knife and start hitting this man with all I got. I stabbed him a good 24 or so times and matrixed all of his attacks, but eventually he kicked me around like a hacky sack and dips. After I get back up, I go check on Luis. As I saw him on the floor like that, I remembered all the good times we had together. He may have been nothing but a nuisance for this challenge, but we had some good times together.
Hey, are you trying to kill me?
Well, kinda. I was gonna miss his company. So at the end of the chapter, the kill counter was at 5. And when I went back to check the footage and count how many I had killed, I had only killed 4, but I had a pretty good idea of where the additional kill came from. For some reason at the end of the Krauser knife fight, when you get his health low enough to trigger the cutscene that ends the chapter, it counts as you killing Krauser even though he's definitely fine. I confirmed this by going to a speedrun Orchestral did to see if his kill counter went up to the end of the chapter, and it sure did. So this chapter was a success. I didn't kill any enemies that were unavoidable. Chapter 12 is when things got really interesting. Upon loading and going up to the lift that leads to the cart that goes to the clock tower, I backtracked to the double Garrador room and entered the throne room. I grabbed the gold egg that Salazar had locked up, and I also grabbed a brown egg from one of the chickens in the throne room and threw it at his portrait to complete a request and grab some spinels. After that I went back to the merchant to turn it in, and then went to the clock tower. Salazar gives an actual compliment for once, or at least I think he is, and then immediately throws a tons of goons at us. F you, Salazar. This section is pretty rough because there's a Salazar head that will burn the enemies to death and the iron ball that will crush and kill the enemies in one shot. I shoot the head immediately because like most sections, if I don't shoot and blow it up, then it's not possible to keep the Zealots from running right into it and dying. I aggroed as many enemies to me as possible at the bottom and then ran up to the top of the steps. But then something weird happened. On my way up the stairs, I suddenly lost control of Leon. I thought my keyboard was malfunctioning or my game was just having a hiccup, but then I started moving my mouse and the enemies couldn't hit me. I was really confused as to what was happening and why I randomly lost control and couldn't take damage, but then I realized something. The exact position of where I lost control is where a cutscene of a zealot pulling the lever to drop the iron ball is supposed to play. Then my heart sank. Do you remember what I did back in chapter 10? I pulled that lever. I pulled that fucking lever that they're supposed to use. I actually couldn't even believe what was happening, so I reloaded the checkpoint. Maybe it was a fluke. Ah, shit. Well, this is really bad. Like, the worst setback of this entire challenge bad. This meant I would have to do the entirety of chapter 10 and 11 again. This includes all of the backtracking, the double Garradors, the Vertigo, the mines, the double Gigante, and the minecart and more all over again. I took a small break once this happened, but once I returned, I put my pride aside, admitted it was my fault anyway, and reloaded back to the beginning of chapter 10. Man, I forgot how bad off I was here. I don't know exactly how to prove I did it all again, but I did record a tiny bit of the journey back to where I was. I filmed a bit of Chapter 10 in the results screen and did the same in Chapter 11. I did everything the exact same way. I flashed the Gyarados, I killed the double Gigante with the handgun, I shot the arrows on the minecart, and all that. I even did the backtracking again because I really needed that ammo. After a couple hours or something, I'm not entirely sure, I did finally get back to the clock tower and there was no softlock this time, so that's good. What ain't good on the other hand is how hard it was to make the strat for the enemies not to die. So once I got up to the section where the Iron Ball cutscene plays, I started to immediately theory craft some strategies. My first idea was to see if I could stun the Gold Mask enemy in the middle of the cutscene so that he wouldn't be able to pull the lever. This was a good idea, but after a decent amount of tries and testing, I realized there was no way to get the flash grenade to go off close enough to him before or during the cutscene, so I had to ditch that idea. But I knew the concept of flashing him would be the move. I just needed to find a way to make it work. Also, can I just say how goddamn stupid the checkpoint I got here was? As soon as I loaded into the game, there was a zealot right behind me trying to grab me, and then right in front of me there was someone throwing an axe at me, bending the damn matrix to hit me. So I was getting hit from all angles straight up from the get-go. What made it even better was the sheer number of enemies coming at me at Mach speed. There were a good 12 enemies or something bum rushing me with scythes and all kinds of crap. As annoying as this was, it gave me a good idea. So my plan was to aggro all of the enemies to follow me all the way back to the bottom of the clock tower, and then flash grenade all of them and haul the ass back up to the top. This was a great idea, and I knew for a fact it was the plan that would work, but there was a massive problem. I didn't have anywhere close to enough flash grenades to get through this section and then the elevator that followed. The elevator section right after this was going to require a ton of flash grenades if I was going to do it non-lethal, so I had to backtrack even more. I went back to the throne room and grabbed the gold chicken egg again and did the request as well. I went back to the merchant to turn it in. And then I realized if I was going to get enough flash grenades, I needed to get the black attaché case. The black attaché case increases the drop rate for large resources, which is what you need to craft flash grenades. The problem though was I only had 5 spinels after turning in the request for egging the Salazar portrait, and the case I needed was 8 spinels. I wasn't sure what to do here since I didn't have any other requests to do, but then I remembered I now had 2 gold eggs. I was going to save them both for a part later in the run, but if I sold 1 gold egg to the merchant, the request for it would give me 3 spinels. This would give me exactly enough spinels to grab the case I needed. It was a bit of an unfortunate sacrifice, but it was the only way I was going to get this chapter done as a pacifist. After I bought it, I immediately equipped it and got to backtracking. I'll spare you the monotony of all that and skip to the results after looting the castle again. So after I was done looting the castle, I was able to get a hold of 7 flash grenades, which I was confident would be more than enough to get both the Iron Ball section as well as the elevator done. So it was finally time to put the idea I had to the test. I had to shoot a couple of enemies to get them aggro to me without the cutscene playing, but I didn't kill them and I only shot them in the foot, so they'll be fine. I lured everybody to the bottom floor with me, and then I got as far up the staircase as I could and threw the flashbang. I ran as fast as I could up the stairs, and once I got about halfway up I threw another flash to the bottom of the floor just to ensure no one would die to the Iron Ball. Once the cutscene was triggered, I kept just running and running and running. But once I got a couple flights or so before the gold mask guy, I threw a flash at him so he wouldn't drop any more of the balls, and then made my way all the way to the top with him. Once you get to the top with him, he's not programmed to get back on it ever again. So I got to the checkpoint near the elevator and backtracked to make sure no one died to the Iron Ball. Thankfully, there were no casualties from what I could tell, so I reloaded the checkpoint and started the elevator section. Once the elevator section began, I tried my best to save some flash grenades by using the explosive barrels to hopefully stun them, but after I accidentally blew one of them completely in half, I said screw it and just used the flash grenades. Once the elevator gets to a certain height, the enemies can't jump onto it, so they have to run a bunch to get to the next jumping platform. But as soon as they got there, I just threw another flash grenade. I repeated this about 3 or 4 times, and to my surprise, I got this done in no time. And I even had a flash grenade to spare. Now that I'm at the top of the clock tower, I do a bunch of looting and repair my gear. I then buy another upgrade to the attaché case size and head into the next boss arena. Salazar once again is being a prick and babbling about his nonsense, yada yada yes yes yes, so I just blasted him to save him the embarrassment. One may say this is non-pacifist-like, but I personally think this is the nicest thing I could do for him and the world as a whole. After I blast him, he transforms into his monster form and it's time for me to take him down. Salazar is another boss that can't be skipped, at least with the current knowledge we have of the game, so I have to take him down with the default handgun. I do bend the rules a teeny tiny bit because I do want to show something cool. You remember that gold egg we grabbed all the way back in the village at Bakbasup Island? Well, it turns out eggs are Salazar's biggest weakness, at least gold ones anyway. If you hit him with one, it'll do 70% of his health. This is what I've been saving it for the entire game. And I'm glad I did because even with this cool Easter egg, I still had barely enough ammo in the handgun to take him out. and that's even with the ammo drops I got from Salazar's blobs. For this boss, I used the strategy I like to use in casual playthroughs, and that's to camp on the staircase on the left side of the battlefield from the start and pick shots at him while corner peeking, so he can't really get a good shot on me. Even with this strategy though, it was still a rough battle because of how long it took. Salazar's attacks hurt pretty badly on hardcore, especially when the body armor is broken. So there were a decent amount of times where I would just get destroyed despite my best efforts, but after a few attempts, I eventually put him to sleep for good.
You're always big! You cry like a bitch!
After the fight was done, I did an out of bounds glitch and threw a grenade at the ground to skip the elevator section. There's really no point to doing this besides the fact it's really funny. After falling through the Earth's core and landing on the bottom of the elevator, I loot a bit, and then hop in the boat to try to catch up to Ashley and Krauser. I don't got the key though, but Ada got my back and escorts me to the island. So after several setbacks, Chapter 12 was finally done, and with that the entire castle section. It was all worth it because we got through it with no one dying. I was just so glad it was over because this castle gave me so many problems, and to be honest, I was done. I knew the island wouldn't be much easier, but at least it would be nice to have a different scenery. Needless to say, I was right about the island not being much easier because this chapter, while not the hardest to do on paper, was random as all hell. In this beginning section there's a bunch of turrets, and if I or any of the soldiers on this island walk into the red zone of the turret, then we're dead. They're programmed to not walk into this red area, but sometimes they just decide to break the script and walk into it anyway. It's kind of deep when you think about it. These AI are so determined to die that they break through the programming to kill themselves. This motivated me to save them even more. These fellas deserved saving. In this beginning section is the new type of Brutus enemy as well, and these dudes got a machine gun mounted to their arm. Or at least I thought it was a machine gun, but it's actually an auto crossbow device, which is pretty interesting. This can kill the enemies as well, but if he starts shooting me, then it's going to be a very bad time. He shreds through my HP and body armor like it's butter, so I need to avoid him at all costs. He also has a move where he kicks you if you get too close to him, and I swear there were points where he would kick me a good 5 or so times in a row just to cuck me, which was extremely annoying. So to get past this section, you need to move the turrets in a way that opens a path to the door beyond the staircase that has a turret blocking it. You need to move the turret blocking the stairs, obviously, and then you also need to move a turret on top of one of these buildings so that you can get around it and onto the path that opened up from the first turret being moved. Doing this normally isn't that hard, but trying to do it without anyone getting blasted by the turret can be pretty rough because as the turret is moving position, if there is an enemy in the way at all, they get gunned down and die guaranteed. So I needed to lure all of the enemies to stay away from the vicinity of the turrets and then move the turrets. Sometimes even this wasn't enough though, because like I said, they would just sometimes decide to walk into it and there's not much I can really do about that. There's also some Molotov enemies in this section as well that are a massive pain in the ass because these enemies on the island section actually carry 2 of them in each hand, which makes them twice as dangerous. 2 themselves, of course. I tried to stay away from these guys as much as I could, but as usual, sometimes they just screwed me over. At this point in the challenge, and especially after Chapter 12, it was really hard to even care about failing at this point. It was honestly something I expected, so it wasn't too annoying at the least at this point. Nothing could be worse than the waterhall and all the shit I dealt with up to this point, right? Anyway, after a decent amount of fails for the various reasons previously stated, I got through the door at the top of the stairs and reloaded the checkpoint once I had gotten it. I then did what I always do now and backtracked a tiny bit to make sure no one was dead. I didn't see any bodies nor items on the ground, so I reloaded the checkpoint to save myself some time and carried on. Next up is a section where a dude with a rocket launcher is shooting at you, but he honestly isn't much of a problem at all. He can hardly kill the other soldiers, and if he hits me it'll hurt, but it won't kill me. There was a dynamite guy here though that made it annoying, but like all the other dynamite guys, I just baited all his attacks and then I booked it to the next room. As usual, I reloaded the checkpoint just to lower the chances of anyone dying. After running past several more enemies and rooms, I see Ashley locked in a cell. I yelled at her with no response, so the cooties must be getting pretty crazy. To get into the cell, I need to get a level 3 keycard. To get said level 3 keycard, I needed to get a level 1 keycard and upgrade it by putting it into various machines throughout the facility. I grabbed the level 1 keycard and get ambushed by an enemy with the fattest ass I had ever seen. It was pretty damn impressive, I'm not gonna lie, but I had to get my priorities straight and get this keycard upgraded. This section isn't bad at all. Kind of, but we'll get to that in a second. So getting the second keycard is pretty easy. After turning the power on initially and grabbing the level 1 card, you need to flip the switch again and switch the power over to the freezer room where the level 2 card upgrader is. Once you put the card in, there's a regenerator that pops out of a bag and starts trying to run by pockets. But I just used a glitch similar to the one and used in the cabin to make it to where he can't hit me. If you aim the sniper at the ground and walk backward into the machine, he can't hit you, which makes this part a cakewalk. Until I got grabbed trying to get out of the freezer. But honestly, that's not that big of a deal. I don't need that much health at this point in the game. The only thing I needed was handgun ammo. Then came the third card upgrade, and this is when things got complicated. For the third card, you have to kill a regenerator that has the wrench key item needed to open the lock that has the upgrade machine. This section of the game is where I started to question Leon's intelligence. Why the hell can't I just grab one of the random wrenches laying around the freaking island? Also, why the hell does the regenerator even have a wrench, and how did it eat it? It's still in the observation container, so did a researcher here just feed it the wrench or something? I had way too many questions, but at this point with everything I had seen, I just said screw it and went with it. So I used the biosensor scope to see which regenerator had the wrench, and then I started blasting it with my pea shooter. Killing this regenerator with just a handgun was not easy. At all. What made it even worse is that there was a soldier in this room trying to kill me and screw me over while I'm trying to avoid getting grabbed by this regenerator while also trying to destroy its weak point with the handgun. I'm not sure if this is uncommon knowledge or not, but you can actually destroy the weak points of the regenerators with any weapon. It just requires more ammo and precision than doing it with the sniper and biosensor scope. To destroy the weak points with the non-upgraded handgun though, I basically had to be perfect. I couldn't really afford to miss. I couldn't afford to accidentally let the other regenerators out, I couldn't let myself get hit by the other soldier, like, everything had to be perfect. Despite this, it was also one of my favorite parts of the run alongside the minecart section. It was really hard, sure, but this was for the most part pure skill. I needed accuracy, movement, parrying skills, and manipulating the AI to make sure I avoided damage while keeping the pressure on the weak points. Against all odds, I actually ended up killing the regenerator with the default handgun. I even showed the handgun stats to prove that I didn't have the firepower upgraded or anything like that at all. After I put the card into the card upgrade machine, a bunch of goons started rushing me down. What a surprise. There was a dynamite guy, but I did what I always do to keep him from killing people. I used the same method from the freezer room to keep the people from hitting me or killing myself, then booked it back to Ashley. Ashley's cooties are definitely getting the best of her, so I gave her some medicine to make her feel better, which unfortunately means no left for me. I guard her until she wakes back up, and then it's time to see what the kill counter says at the end. Okay, I don't know what the went down to give me extra kills on the encounter. I swear at this point I'm convinced that every single time I backtrack to make sure no enemies die, somehow enemies magically just die right after. I know there are two unavoidable kills in this chapter. The one is the regenerator I killed for the wrench, and the other is a guy that comes rushing out of a fridge or whatever on fire. This death counts, so the kill counter should have been at 2. I'm assuming that enemies magically died right at the start from the turrets after reloading the checkpoint. But honestly, I didn't know and I didn't care because I had to do the chapter anyways. I did everything the exact same. I lured the enemies at the start from the turret, I ran past 99% of the enemies in rooms, and then I once again killed the regenerator with the starting handgun. I got back to Ashley in the cell and the kill counter was at 2 as it should have been. I was still a little annoyed that the 2 enemies magically died, but at least the chapter was done and I didn't fail. It was also kind of fun killing the regenerator again, believe it or not. Chapter 14 was mostly easy due to some glitches, but it had by far the hardest boss in this challenge. Starting the chapter, I start scavenging the island as much as I can for handgun ammo for the battle ahead, and then I did a door skip to immediately get to the rising platform on the other side. This effectively skips over half the chapter and keeps Ashley out of danger, because you never have to encounter a single enemy, and this saves a ton of ammo as well as other resources. The only slight L is that I can't get any of the resources that may be throughout the sections I skipped, but it's a net positive in the end. After we skipped all that, we pulled up to the root of the cooties, and then the master of cooties appeared, Sadler. He takes control of us and compels Ashley to grab my pea shooter and kill me, but she refrains and shoots his servants. Honestly, I thought this was just funny because I thought they even died from those headshots considering how terrible my gun is at this point in the game. So if she shot me, I'd probably just shrug it off like, whatever. But the gun jams and Sadler runs off with Ashley. This is pretty funny because we quite literally just got her back like 10 or something minutes ago. But hey, it makes the challenge easier, so I ain't complaining. After running past some more enemies, I pulled up to Krauser's hideout where he's got a picture with my name on it, an audio tape left out for me, and a trail made out of blood where he says he's waiting for me. I ain't gonna lie, this is maybe the gayest thing I've ever seen in the Resident Evil franchise, but I'm kinda willing to indulge in it. I drop into the ruins after chilling with the homeboy merchant for a bit again, and Krauser and I start having a heart-to-heart. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kinda out of jokes at this point, so I'm just gonna skip to the boss itself. This challenge had a toll on me, I tell you what. So this boss isn't really that hard, but where the difficulty came in was my ammo situation. I think this is the first boss in the game where I felt like I was actually 100% screwed when it came to my ammo situation. And the main reason for that is this fight has a few phases to it. The first phase is right at the start where he's shooting his explosive arrows at you, and after that he starts rushing you down with a knife. This is pretty much the same as fighting him in the mines from chapter 11, but this time I can use my handgun. I actually think using the knife was better because the amount of ammo I had to use here was actually insane, and it was just the first phase. I started the phase with 96 bullets or so, and I ended it with just 46, which might not sound bad, but that's the easiest part. The second part of the boss has you navigating a labyrinth with a bunch of traps planted by Krauser, and he'll occasionally rush you down or shoot at you with his explosive bow. This is all pretty easy to avoid. The most annoying part of this section is when you have to hide behind some walls for cover because sometimes you can get screwed over by a fumble animation or a bear trap, but I got through it more or less painlessly. Now the third part of this boss has to be my favorite trick in the game. In case you haven't played this boss before, let me explain something real quick. So during this boss, Krauser constantly does attacks that you need to evade with quick time events. And when you do these QTEs, you actually have invincibility frames. Now around the battlefield are a bunch of tripwires, so if you do a QTE that does an animation that throws you into the tripwire, you can actually activate it and hit Krauser with it, which does a ton of damage. If I didn't use this strategy, I'm pretty convinced that this strategy would have been impossible, because even by doing that really cool strat, I only had about 8 bullets left at the end. Before going into the actual fight, I picked up and crafted some ammo and got back up to it with 73 bullets. With the previous phases done, I head up to the ladder and initiate the final phase and take Krauser down for good. That's the idea anyway, because I'm not confident whatsoever that the amount of ammo I have is going to be enough, but I was going to try regardless. Despite my lack of confidence in my ammo supply and how hard the boss was with just the handgun, it was actually pretty fun. Krauser is one of the better designed bosses in the game in my opinion, because you can really get a feel of what attacks he wants to go for if you get into a pattern. If he does the attack where he grabs your head, you can actually crouch and make it miss, which gives you a free opening to attack. His other attacks can either be parried or avoided pretty easily for the most part. My main strategy was to stay on the bottom floor of the arena and run in a circle and wait for him to do an attack, make it miss, and go for headshots with my handgun. Well, I did this and it went well until I ran out of ammo entirely. This was the first time in the whole run where I was completely tapped for resources. I had no ammo, no knife, so it was over. I tried a few times after that failure, and no matter how many headshots I landed, it still wasn't enough for him to die. Not even close, in fact. So I had to bend another rule of the challenge and use melee attacks. I suppose this chapter is another failure for this fact, but with all the ammo I needed for Salazar and the regenerator shortly before, there wasn't much I could do. Even with melee attacks, I had just barely enough ammo to kill him, and that's with the multiple perfect parries that gave me a free opening. After he was dead, I gave him an honorable death and moved through the now open gate that leads to the end of the chapter. Once I got to the chapter results, I saw I had 2 kills on the counter. I was pretty confused here because I know for a fact no one else could have died besides Krauser, especially after skipping half the chapter. Well, it turns out that for whatever reason, similarly to chapter 11 in the mines, when you beat Krauser in the first phase, it actually counts as a separate kill from the final phase. I didn't know this and ended up doing the entire chapter again, which was a complete waste of time. But hey, I completed it as a pacifist twice, so that's gotta count for something, right? So you all remember what I said about nothing getting worse after Waterhall or chapter 12? Well, boy, was I wrong. I got a lot of explaining to do in this chapter, but this is the final roadblock of the challenge. So at the start of this chapter, I go and fully upgrade the durability of the knife we took off of Krauser after defeating him. This was nice because I now had the combat knife in the fighting knife, so I wouldn't need to worry about my knife breaking for the rest of the run. I wish I could have gotten this earlier for sections like the Krauser fight itself, but better now than never. With that now done, it was time for the Mike section. Unlike the original RE4 version of this section, Mike is a beast and helps a ton with dealing with the enemies. Normally this is nothing but a W, but for the Pacifist challenge, God, this was actual torture! Since Mike is actually extremely efficient at killing the enemies, I had no idea what enemies were actually unavoidable and what enemies could be saved. All I knew for sure is that it's 100% impossible for every enemy to survive no matter how hard I try, but I was going to try my best. So at the very start of this section are about 6 or 7 enemies camping waiting for me to pop up, and they have a machine gun turret as well as a rocket launcher. I took cover behind the little box thingy right in front of these guys and waited for the rocket launcher guy to shoot. Then Mike came and absolutely annihilated everything. Well, I could have gone a lot better. I reloaded the save and tried to shield the enemies from Mike's bullets, but he did not give a single damn and just blasted on anyone anyways, including me. The closest I got to having everyone survive this initial onslaught was having only 1 casualty, but that wasn't going to cut it. I reloaded again and again, and then I got an idea to lure the enemies behind the building so Mike could not shoot them. I figured this would be a good test to see if these enemies can actually survive or not, so I got to cooking. I lured one of the enemies behind the building and parried his attacks for a good 5 or so minutes, and the phase with Mike never started. It turns out every single enemy in this beginning section has to die for the phase to begin, so these kills were completely unavoidable, which also meant I completely wasted my time trying to save these guys. Well, that sucks, but at least I didn't have to feel bad about their unfortunate passing. The next part was when I was fully stumped. It honestly isn't even that difficult, but the problem is I did not have anywhere close to enough flash grenades to keep the enemies out of harm's danger. In this section there are 2 areas where enemies are dropping down. There's one on the opposite side of the building and one near the back side of the building. The ones that drop behind the building are more or less safe, but the ones that drop down for the other position are destined to get blasted on by Mike. The only way I could get them to not drop down and die was to throw flash grenades, but I didn't have enough to keep them stunned for long enough for the phase to end. And even when the phase does end, Mike still shoots at the enemies until you reach the trigger for the next part. This had me fully stunned for a while because without sufficient flash grenades, it's actually impossible to keep them from dying, which was extremely frustrating. Knowing exactly what method to do but not being able to do it due to a lack of resources was a hard pill to swallow, especially since that would mean I would be failing this chapter in the challenge immediately. So I kept trying to see if I could figure something out. Unfortunately, without the flash grenades, I don't think there is any possible way to have everyone survive. So I just did my best to lure everyone out behind the building with me to wait out the timer. Once enough enemies are behind the building, no one else would spawn. So all I had to do at that point was hide and avoid the enemy's attacks. Once the phase was done, I just prayed to God and ran in the next section. Here's once again a section where a bunch of enemies are destined to die, but it was a bit hard to tell who and who wasn't required to die here, but I think I figured it out. So the people on top of the platform with the rocket launcher and all that have to die, but the other enemies on the ground, while very hard to keep alive, could theoretically live. I think it's completely random whether Mike will kill them or not, but if I could keep them alive for long enough, I could trigger this section for the AA gun to keep them out. This AA gun is my best friend for this challenge because it keeps Mike from killing all the enemies until I destroy it. This section is pretty interesting because you're usually meant to go up to the top of the building and use a turret gun to blast the AA gun and destroy it, but you can just throw grenades at it to kill it immediately. I don't know whether this AA gun being destroyed counts as a kill or not, but whatever, it has to be done regardless, so even if it does, it's an unavoidable kill. Once the turret is donezo, a bunch of enemies come out of nowhere and Mike is now available to shoot again, which is just great because there's no way for me to really tell who he's shooting at because these enemies are everywhere. After a bit of waiting though, he eventually blows open the gate that leads to the next area, and at this point Mike is permanently gone, which means I don't have to worry about him blasting on the soldiers anymore. While this was good news, there was a problem. This war room that I now have access to essentially has every damn enemy type in the game. There's Molotov, rocket launcher, dynamite, machine gun turrets, both portable and stationary, the parasite plaga, and a ton of different enemies. So this meant trying to keep all of them alive from killing each other was going to be an issue. A big one. I think this is probably the hardest room to do in the game non-lethal because there is so much that could go wrong. There wasn't even anywhere I could really bait these attacks out to make them miss anyone like there have been in other sections. So I was really confused as to what the hell I was going to do here. My first plan was to just book it for the levers that open the gate to the next area. But this didn't work out because the enemies would always somehow kill themselves. My next idea was to camp near one of the ladders in an enclosed area and wait for a bunch of the enemies on the ground floor to come to me, then haul ass to the levers like I tried before. But this resulted in the same fate of someone dying. With these two options out of the window, I was completely lost on what to do. Even without might, these enemies are the biggest danger to themselves. They just cannot stop trying to kill themselves. So I decided to watch a speedrun to see if they do anything special here. And boy do they do something special. So first of all, shout out to Frit who I watched to find this strat. It turns out you can skip the entire second part of the war room if you just do an out of bounds glitch with the sniper. You get an autosave as soon as the AA turret shooting at Mike is destroyed. So if you immediately throw a grenade and swap to the sniper and perform the glitch at the metal fence shown in the video, you can just out of bounds your way through the whole section. This meant I could probably get through without Mike killing hardly anyone and avoid having to deal with the enemies in the second phase. This was a really nice trick because it meant I wouldn't have to suffer through that garbage anymore. So I did the glitch and got the hell out of there. I had no idea how many people Mike killed, but I would find out soon enough. After getting past the war room, I hop in the helicopter with Mike. Oh. Well, that's unfortunate. Where the hell were all those Novisador just a few minutes ago in the war room? I guess they and Sadler just knew exactly where we would be and decided to prepare. Which honestly isn't that big of a search considering we've made it this far, but if they expected us to make it through there, why didn't they just ambush us alongside the other soldiers? And come on, man, I just spared so many of your servants, can't you just throw us a bone and let us get the hell out of here? Whatever, our mission hasn't changed. We still gotta go get Ashley anyway. Next up is a room where we're meant to carefully navigate a specimen room and avoid aggroing the regenerators that are hiding in bags. But we just clip through the locked doors and skip it. Thank God, because I hate this room. But it doesn't get any better from here because there's another section that's actually just as bad as the war room. Actually, it's worse than the war room because there's machine gun turrets from the beginning of chapter 13 as well as Novisadors on top of all the other enemy types from the war room. So f*** me, man. I'm sorry if it seems like I've become more negative throughout this run, but god man, everybody, this challenge was just taking forever. But I was determined to get this done. In this section you need to run through one of the buildings here, flip the turret to a different position so you can get to the next section, and then obviously go to the next section. This was extremely annoying to do, however, because on top of all the other things I mentioned that are in this section, there are also trip mines that I cannot disarm because they're the more advanced versions of them, and the enemies just love to walk right into them. I barely had any flash grenades either, and Big Brutus like the 8th or something was guarding the turret with a mini machine gun, which wouldn't be a problem if I also didn't have to worry about the enemies not killing themselves. So instead of torturing myself doing this, I decided to do a cool trick instead. It involves killing an enemy, but at this point I had more than failed, so what was more and more kill gonna do really, right? Plus, it's a really sick trick that you may not know about. So if you go right next to the laser where the turret is, there's a chance that a Novisador will run right into the laser in an attempt to hit you. And when it does this, you can actually run right past the laser since the Novisador takes the shots for you. These noble Novi sacrifices will not be in vain. I then magically fall underneath the mat. Man, I wonder what could have happened. Ignore what's on the screen, you don't see that. It's a figment of your imagination. We finally catch up to Ashley. But then, what do you know? Sadler was there waiting. I feel like this was the most obvious bait in the game, but I suppose Leon didn't really have a choice here, so I can't blame him despite how dumb it is in theory. The cooties damn near get the hold of me, but Ada starts blasting on Sadler with a TMP, which allows me to grab Ashley and get the hell out of there. I start carrying Ashley in a completely normal and definitely not stupid way. Don't worry, Ashley. Everything is going to be just fine. I promise. After getting through horrors beyond human comprehension, we use the key Louise gave us all the way back in chapter 11 and get rid of those damn cooties for the both of us. Thank God, because I was starting to feel like Icky Vicky or something. Now, what I'm not thankful for is being able to see the results screen at the end here, because good lord, I feel like this is going to be rough. So when this chapter was all said and done, I had a total of 22 kills on the counter, which, honestly, I think is a pretty good number. But it's time to count how many enemies you can theoretically avoid killing in this chapter. Cue the analysis music. So at the beginning of the chapter where Mike comes in the helicopter, there are a total of 7 enemies that have to be killed for the next phase to start. There's 4 on the bottom and 3 at the top, so there's that. Now after that is when things get a bit dicey. Like I said before, I think it's probably possible to have every enemy survive in this section, but you need an obscene amount of luck and flash grenades that I simply did not have enough of. After that, however, are another few enemies that are going to die no matter what. There are a total of 7 enemies on the top of the tower that get blown up by Mike in the cutscene, so we're at a total of 14 kills that cannot be avoided right now. After that, I think it's probably possible to have no one else die, but the chances of Mike not killing any more people before blowing up the door and leaving the area are extremely low, and honestly it could be impossible. I'm not really sure how this section is programmed, but I imagine it's similar to the first phase where eventually he'll just go into the cutscene of blowing up the door and then he'll dip. So if in theory you got as lucky as possible and had Mike not kill any other enemies besides those 14, which are extremely low odds, you could do this without killing any unnecessary enemies. Regardless though, since I did get those Novisadors killed at the turret after the war room, I definitely failed. But I failed before that anyway, so it's honestly whatever. I'm pretty content with how close I got to the theoretical perfect outcome. At long last, Chapter 16, the final chapter. It has been an extremely long run. In fact, the total time it took for me to complete this run was 25 plus hours in case you were wondering. This chapter is actually really short and only has one boss fight to complete, Sadler. After recovering from the surgery procedure, we made our way right to him. No fluff or anything in this one, we just ran straight there. Ada is tied up and we gotta save her. And man, she's so helpful in this fight. She doesn't shoot a single shot, and right when the fight starts, she just runs and disappears into thin air. So that meant I was all on my own. Thanks, Ada. I was starting to miss Luis, to be honest. I mean, at least he helped me, shit. This boss honestly wasn't that hard in practice, but since I had absolutely no ammo from the Krauser fight, it was really hard. There were a few crates I could break to get some more ammo, but there was absolutely no chance I could get enough to kill him with the default handgun alone. The only other idea I had to get enough ammo was to kill the Novisadors during one of the phases of the fight, but that was obviously going to break the Pacifist part of this run. But I did want to do the fight handgun only, so I said screw it and did it. Well, it turns out this didn't even give me enough handgun ammo to beat him with the pea shooter alone, so I had to use every single grenade I had in my inventory throughout the entire game and stab him in the eye while he was on the ground. Also, if you're wondering what my strategy was for this fight, it was just to run as fast as I could and try to stay out of range from all of his attacks. So I was jumping up and down the platform on one side of the arena, and then I would climb the ladder up to the start of the fight, and then I would make a big loop and continue this to hopefully minimize damage. I died once or twice, but I did eventually beat him after realizing I had to use hand grenades. I don't know exactly how much handgun ammo you would need for this section of the fight, but it's gotta be in the 300 plus range, which absolutely was not happening. That soon after the Krauser fight especially. And since I couldn't kill him fast enough, I couldn't stop the Novisadors from dying either. So it was just a double L, to be honest. After he was dead, I waited out the final phase and Ada threw me the rocket launcher, and I blasted him with it, finishing him off for good. After all is said and done, Ada takes the Amber and asks if we want to go on her with the helicopter. And in Leon's own words,
I think we both know this is where we go our separate ways.
yeah, I really wonder what they're hinting at with that line at the end there. Don't think about it too hard though, because we have the most ironic part of this whole challenge right here. So since Sadler died, Las Plagas died with him, which means every single person infected with Las Plagas is now going to die. So every single enemy that I have spared throughout the entire game is now dying as we speak. If that isn't the most poetic ending to this challenge as possible, then I don't know what is. We quite literally wasted our time trying to save everyone because they are all dead now anyway. But what matters is the journey, not the destination, as they say. After I realized this, I just started to laugh, to be honest. I couldn't think of a more fitting end to this challenge. After all of that was said and done, Ashley and I got on the jet ski and started to make our escape off the island. So, in these final moments of the challenge, I have a few serious things I want to say. It's safe to say the end of this challenge was not graceful. The last 3 chapters back to back were rough and felt essentially impossible with the challenge criteria I had set, but that wasn't going to deter me from trying my best. No matter what the circumstance is in life, if you're going to do something, then do it to a standard you can be proud of. Things aren't always going to be easy, and things may screw you over, but it'll all work out in the end, I promise. Even though there were a good amount of sections where I had to restart, redo sections where I straight up failed, or whatever it may have been, it was a fun journey and I don't regret it. Challenging myself to do something I thought was impossible from the start was never going to be easy, but despite that, I confronted the challenge head on and did better than I had expected. So if you take anything from this video aside from my suffering and failures throughout this challenge, then take my words of encouragement and be the best version of yourself you can be in life. I believe in you, and just know that you are loved. Also, I must thank you all so much for the support on the first video. The reception and support on that part was honestly mind-blowing, and I'm really glad you all enjoyed it. Also, I want to start doing something new. I want to start highlighting you all in my videos. So if you have any questions or things you want to say, then please comment it down below and I'll pick a comment to feature in the next video. I know this speech may seem really out of place considering this is just a challenge run of a new video game, but I know how the world is right now and it can be pretty tough to find the motivation or discipline to do the things you need to or want to do. So let this be your sign to not give up no matter the circumstance. You are capable of much more than you realize, and the only thing holding you back is your own doubt. It's easier said than done, but don't be afraid to ask your loved ones for help in your troubling times. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, so never give up. I believe in you. Once the game was done, I checked the kill counter for chapter 16 and it was at 22. Much higher than it should have been, but that's okay. Before we go ahead and wrap up the video, I think it's important to take a look back at the run as a whole and see where I failed and what the true number of kills you cannot avoid in the game is. I'm going to skip the chapters where I had to use different things to kill enemies such as the Knights and Krauser, but I put an asterisk next to them in the chart to indicate it wasn't technically valid. So the first failure I had in this challenge was the cabin back in chapter 5. I assume it's possible to get through this chapter with 0 kills on the counter as long as you get really lucky and perform the glitches I showed in that part, but I threw in the towel for the sake of getting the video out. The next true failure was much later in chapter 15. I killed 22 enemies, and as I said, I suspect the minimum amount you can finish the chapter with is 14. Maybe 15 if the AA gun counts. The 7 at the beginning, and the 7 near the middle, plus the AA gun as I just said. The rest is pure RNG and praying that Mike won't end up killing anyone, as well as having a sufficient amount of flash grenades to protect the enemies. Finally, there's chapter 16. Doing this while with just a handgun just isn't possible to do as a pacifist because the Novistadors are inevitably going to die and the odds of having enough ammo are next to none. After I had finished the game with the handgun, I reloaded the chapter back to the beginning, bought a rocket launcher, and shot Sadler with it. This saved all of the Novistador kills and brought the kill counter from 24 to 2. This probably meant that both faces of Sadler count as separate kills, which was good to know. So when all is said and done, here are the final results. The total retries, the amount of kills I had versus the amount possible, how long it took, and all that. Pretty insane when you look at it all like this. I think the fact that for the most part I only failed 3 chapters in the game is pretty impressive. But what do you all think? Do you all have any ideas of what I could have done better in this run? And with all that covered, we are officially done with the Pacifist challenge and as a result, this video. But I've got a very special message for those of you who made it to the end. If this video somehow gets 150,000 views or 1,500 likes, I will do this challenge all over again on professional difficulty. So if you want to see that, then definitely make sure to share this video if you can. Professional would make this challenge 10 times harder, so that's why the goal is massive. This doesn't have a time limit, just throughout the history of the challenge and this video being live, if it ever hits that goal, I'll do it on pro. It kind of feels weird to be fully done. I don't really know how to end it, but this has been your boy YandereGogeta, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.